Welcome to the Odd Labs podcast. Our special guest today is Brooke Hartley Moy. Brooke, thanks for hanging out with us today. I appreciate it.
Excited to be here. Glad to talk to you.
Yay. Where are you coming from today, Brooke?
I am based in San Francisco, and actually, it's an exciting day because we just upgraded our offices. And so we used to have the sad view of the parking lot, and now we actually look out on the bay and the bridge and all that good stuff. So, really is a nice sunny day in San Francisco right now.
Nah, God, I have not been there since COVID. There was points in my life where I felt like I was there for 3 months at a time and then like not show up, but I haven't been there in so long. How's the city since COVID? I heard it's coming back, which is
It is,
good.
I mean, I feel I am, you know, should be getting paid by like the city of commerce or the mayor because I've been beating the drum very hard about how much San Francisco is the place to be right now as far as anyone that wants to do something in AI. And as much as the city has gotten a lot of flack in the media for sort of the post-COVID era, there's so much exciting change and so much from people that are actually on the ground here, so much positivity and momentum. And it just the volume of companies that are forming, the kinds of people, we spend a lot of time recruiting over here at Infactory as a new company, and we keep trying to only recruit from the Bay just because we are small and are trying to keep the team very local. And the number of people who are just trying to move to the Bay and find opportunities here because they know that this is where AI is happening.
That's
It's
awesome.
it's it's
I'm
it's
glad.
it's fun. It's a good time to be here.
I'm glad because it would be fun at the time to walk down the street and run into people. Like I'm in Miami. I don't care what they want to say. This is not going to be the next Silicon Valley. The tech here is just not what it is in like San. It's just not. I don't care how many times they
You
preach
have
it.
other upsides. You've got the weather. You've got
That's why I'm here.
the lower cost of living. So there's
Actually, we
benefits.
lost that. We lost that.
So
That's
all the
that's
California
gone.
people moved in and just
That's
brought it.
gone. All the blockchain grifters came in. That's all gone.
Yes,
So
I hear that a lot from like the Austins and the other tech bubbles about how much it was drawn in by folks who left during pandemic from San Francisco, now basically turning them into mini San Franciscos for better or for worse. So I prefer to be in the original. So
I know. Yeah, I appreciate that tremendously. Okay, since some people here might not know who you are, why don't you give us the 2 minute sort of spiel? I like that word, spiel. 2 minute spiel on what you're doing today.
yeah, so I am CEO and co-founder of Infactory. Infactory is a platform that allows enterprises to ensure more deterministic, more accurate, and more reliable outputs from their AI workflows. That company was started now, we've been around for not quite a year in terms of our official incorporation and did our seed round last fall. My co-founder, Ken Kashenda, and I, we met working together on AI hardware related projects. And Ken is well known in the industry as one of the lead software engineers behind the original iPhone. He has 100 patents, at least, almost all related to iPhone and iOS. My background is in the software side, so I came from Salesforce and Slack on the enterprise, Google for a long time, working on the Android stack, which is always ironic when you consider that I now work with one of the most important people when it comes to the creation of the iPhone. And so I get to troll him all the time about that. And yeah, now, I think both of us having seen so much change in the industry, certainly over the course of, the various waves that have come around SaaS, around no code, around Web3, and now this new wave that feels bigger than all the other ones combined, which is the AI wave. And how is that going to impact pretty much every facet of both society and the enterprise? So, working on the forefront of that.
That's awesome. So I have a client named Prediction Guard. Right? We're helping out build their platform. They're more of a AI platform for privacy and all that stuff. But I have to look at these AI websites all the time from companies, and I just want to give you kudos because I think you are the first company to have a website that I could read about AI and understand what you do.
Okay, I'll take that
I
as a win.
That is a huge win. I cannot tell you how many people I meet that are in these AI companies, and you go to their homepage and you're like, I still have no idea what you're doing. Like it's so vague. But you were like the first in a long time to have a website where like, okay, I get what they're trying to do. Like I get where you fit in. So
Well,
kudos on
I
that.
think that that aligns so much with just the culture of what we're trying to build, which is partly how do you make AI more accessible and more useful to the average person. And I am very anti-jargon. I try to avoid it whenever possible, and it's so easy to get into that mindset when you're surrounded by people that, you live in San Francisco and you're surrounded by AI specialists who've been working on this for some time. And I always try to look at things from the lens of my customer and what kind of language do they use, how do they talk about it. I'm like, we don't use jargon in our regular speak, why would we use it to sell software? So yes, I'm glad that that has come through and that we have some clarity of message in what we're talking about on the website.
Yeah, I think you already know because you're in the middle of it, right? Everybody's trying to attach AI to everything, just like they were trying to attach blockchain to everything, like they're trying to attach whatever else they could over the
AI
years,
washing, if you will.
right? And the word agent drives me completely crazy because that's such a generic term at this point. It almost doesn't mean anything
No, it's
anymore.
it has become word salad for sure. And just in the same way that LLMs is a relatively new technology, are still being understood by the broader enterprise and the broader public. The word agent is I think deeply misunderstood, and that is the fault of the AI community. Like that's not on the it's not surprising that consumers don't understand exactly what we mean by agent, nor do they understand what agents can and can't do at this stage, because we have basically started talking about agents as though they are going to be running our government independently within the next few months. And that is far from their current capabilities. They are doing really, really cool, interesting things. I see a new agent use case pretty much every day, and I'm excited where the tech is going. But there are a lot of steps between here and there as far as true autonomy, which is really what you mean when you talk about agents. And um, I want to see less. I want to see less of the BS and much more of the here's how this technology is going to benefit you in your day-to-day life right now in the current pragmatism of the constraints that we have.
So one last thing before we start to explore sort of your journey, I feel like another thing that's happened is anything now that's attached to AI means that it's leveraging an LLM.
Mm.
And I don't think that's true because some of the things I see we're doing in AI wouldn't necessarily be uh, do, doable today by an LLM. And so I think there's a problem there um, of kind of obscuring. Is this just an algorithm you've been working on that's data driven and it can really do what it can do because of that? Or is it being driven through a new sort of LLM and that's how it's working? I know I get super confused today with that sort of.
Completely.
Where's the distinction?
Yeah, well, I think that also because generative AI as a concept is very new. AI is not new at all. And so the blending of those two things and the way that generative AI has become part of sort of the both the cultural zeitgeist and the actual practical application of it in the enterprise has meant that they are constantly conflated, and that LLMs are this incredible technology that have certainly been a breakthrough for many of the capabilities that we're seeing now, but they are also not always the most logical choice of technology for every situation, nor are they increasingly being proven to be the end all and be all of where the technology is going. And I think we have sort of the position at Infactory that if you put all of your eggs in the LLM basket, you are probably going to be disappointed based on where the capabilities are today. And if you put all the eggs in the LLM basket for the future and like looking far out, you will also probably be disappointed because to truly reach where we want to go with AI over the coming years and decades and these very futuristic type use cases that we believe we can achieve, there are going to need to be technologies outside of the LLM that are innovative and novel that build on what transformer models have been able to provide. And so I think that people now use generative AI and LLMs interchangeably with AI as a whole, and that's causing a lot of the confusion. And we try to spend a lot of the time that we have in Infactory in front of customers trying to distill that down, but um, it's hard. They're challenging concepts at this stage.
And I want to add that you're adding more complexity than you probably need because you're trying to use a hammer when you need a screwdriver in
100%.
some of these cases. Yeah.
Complexity, cost, environmental cost, and financial cost. It's oftentimes I would be very curious to know what percentage of LLM queries could actually be answered using different AI methodologies and advances and may actually be better suited for it. And I think that we're hitting that point in sort of the Gen AI trajectory because I think people now have a greater understanding of what LMs are good at and what they're not good at. But there's still a lot out there that sort of suggests that you want to throw basically every question into an expensive cutting edge model, and that's not in any way the case.
What I find interesting. Okay, last question. We're gonna get back to this at the end, but we're in it, so I have to.
No, no.
What I find interesting is the people that are working on the platforms and the APIs, maybe the people from Google and Microsoft. I get this sense that they want to build the single endpoint. You don't need any other API but this one. It will do everything you ask it to do, from send emails to send SMSs to, and you don't even have to be structured to do it. You just tell it what to do, and it's like a super agent, maybe. I don't know. And I feel like that's where these companies are trying to. So, me as a software developer, instead of me bringing in Stripe APIs and their APIs and integrating all these APIs, I can literally just go to this one API and tell it, do all these things across these platforms. I don't know how I give it my secrets, but given these secrets, passwords, usernames, all that, do all that.
Well, that's not that different from the playbook that the large platforms and conglomerates have been running for a long time. They're super aggregators. Part of the reason why people choose to work with a platform like a Google or a Meta or any of the Microsoft, any of the FANG companies, is because they have a lot of different experiences kind of consolidated under a single endpoint. They haven't done a great job necessarily in truly making all of that sort of one single pane of glass, and that's partly why LLM technology has emerged in a way that has disrupted a lot of their services. But now that the sort of arms race is on, if you will, for who is going to control this new technology going forward and the amount of money that's going into it and the valuations that are popping off and the costs and all of that, they've kind of, the only bet they have is that it's a winner take all sort of situation, and that they will be that endpoint for basically anything that you would want to do with either an internet service or a piece of software. And so it's not surprising that that's how they're positioning itself, because that's the only thing that makes mathematical sense given the financial effort that is taken. I mean, basically, in my mind, for them, it's AGI or bust. Like they can't specialize. They have to just go for making the world's most powerful autonomous AI brain, and they have, the big companies have the technology and the resources to go after that, and that's what they're gonna do, which all consolidates down to being a single endpoint for all of their end users, which is
But to
interesting.
be fair, every time Fang gets involved in a tech, it happens, right? I saw it with Lambda functions. That was all small companies providing those sort of, ability to execute these functions. And then Amazon and Google decided we're going to do it, and all those little companies went away. And we could probably show this over and over and over again, right? And right now, it's definitely getting it from last year. All of these little startups are happening. Every time you turn around, there's another AI startup, more than I'd ever seen on the blockchain side. Um, and I just wonder, and you're in the middle of it.
Yeah.
I, I just wonder if the little companies are going to be able to hold their own, or is it just a matter of time before they all disappear, like I've seen it over and over and over again?
I think the bet that we're making, and that I think a lot of the startups are making, is that there's never been this much disruption of the current order, because there are challenger players coming from places that didn't exist before, and they are partnering often with the large companies. But there's never been a time where like Google's dominance in search, think about Google versus Perplexity right now, has been more in question. And it's not like we're talking about long periods of time. Like these companies haven't existed since the Gilded Age or anything. But as far as the history of software and the history of like the current power players, there's never been so much disruption. And the other side of it is that AI itself, generative AI and the world of LLMs, the capabilities that it offers smaller companies to move faster are inherent advantages that didn't exist before. And so the areas where smaller companies win and emerging as kind of the new power players often comes when you can simply out execute, out outmaneuver because of the nimbleness. And we came from inside these large organizations. We're very aware of their advantages and also their shortcomings. And I think
Yeah.
those are the things that you try to exploit. Move faster. I keep a sign on my desk that's the sign from the bear: make every second count. Every second counts. Um, that's the math that you have to play if you're living in startup land right now.
No, no, I can't believe how fast things are. And the moment you have an idea, somebody's already done it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it doesn't have to be perfect, but they've already done it. It's so hard to be unique. It's so hard to have an original idea today.
But that's also true. I've experienced that firsthand in large companies as well, where uh, you look around and you realize that some unique idea you had within the large company is already being done by a different department, but they've spent 6 months in sort of bureaucratic red tape to get it off the ground. So in fact, it's almost like that idea never existed. And so it's I tell the team all the time that competition is only relevant in the fact that it's often validating that the idea at least is not a bad one if other people are going after it. And it's not the best, it's not the first to idea, it's not a patent game of like first to file. It's who can out execute, and who has the connection and motivation and leadership and all these other factors, and a little bit of luck as well. So we move so fast that I keep trying to make a marketing video, like something like a loom to live on our website, and every time I do, literally within hours, it's obsolete. And so it's a great problem to have. Frustrating from trying to just have something that's sort of reasonably evergreen that could live on our website and show people some demos of our tech. But like that's the pace, right? And that's something that is unique to having a small company, that the tech is already updated and moving forward within a few hours after the last time I used it.
I've met a couple of companies last year that were startups, and I haven't had the heart to tell them that they're not moving fast enough.
Mm.
That they are. I understand the life balance you want to provide everybody, but these things should have been done like in an hour, not in 2 weeks. And I'm seeing this at some level. This crisis people are having with, I've got to give everybody this work life balance, but at the same time, and maybe I'm 55, I'm looking at them like you're dead because you're not moving fast enough. And I don't know how to tell you that. And I don't know how you tell the people that you have hired that maybe they shouldn't be here. I don't know, but
We,
especially today.
that's really interesting feedback. And my experience has been that we honestly try to scare people away when we hire. We have an amazing fractional chief people officer that supports us, and she has always given the advice that people should really understand that being part of a seed company is very challenging, and it is not a time for work life balance, that it simply is not something that is on the table. There are many opportunities that offer work life balance, later stage series C companies, or uh, certainly large technology companies are often a good place for that. I had a great work life balance situation at many of my previous jobs. This is simply not one of them, and it's not just in the founder role, though the founder role is one of the most extreme versions of that. But I make sure that everyone who joins the company understands that the expectations are much higher than they would be at a typical job, and that's because it's a matter of survival. Like if we want to be here next week, we have to be moving that much faster, that much more aggressively in terms of how we're progressing the technology. And that comes with a very different culture than what you would get from another company. Like that's just part of the game. And the other thing I tell people all the time is you should assume because of the math that the equity of this company will be worth no money. Like that's I am doing everything in my power for that to not be the case, and so should everybody else that works here. But the math is not in anyone's favor that this will turn into a decacorn. You have to be kind of crazy as a founder to always sort of believe that that's where you're going. But you to my employees, I try to make the case of so given that you also have to understand that working here may not ever have the financial upside that you want, but your best chance of seeing that financial upside and the best chance of making technology that people are really excited about, working at a pace of innovation that you can't get at a typical job, and the satisfaction of what we're doing, which is really focused on this idea of trust and like laying the groundwork for how people will experience this very new and sometimes scary technology, that has to be motivating in and of itself. So I would tell you to tell the folks who are saying that you're worried they're moving too slowly and it's a work-life balance issue, that if they're a startup, there's no such thing.
I love how you articulated that. I really do, because I have felt that my whole life. I've done startups, my own. I've had futons in my office, work 2 days straight, go home, shower, say, and go back at it, because if it's for all the same things, and I just haven't seen that lately. Except I think if history is telling, you're not going to work less hours. You're just going to get twice as much done in the 60 hours you're already working now, because you can just push through more in those. You know what I'm like? I don't think it's like I'm done. I got it done.
No,
No,
I agree.
let's just get it done.
It's why like I very much consider myself an AI optimist. I don't have a dystopian view generally of AI. And it's because when people talk about, oh well, job replacement and will a agent or any kind of autonomous AI do my work for me? I know in the developer world that's often been a concern of late, given all of the work that's happened in that AI space. And my feeling is no. I mean, I think it's just the nature of what those jobs are change. What I'm hoping is that means that more human attention, more human capacity on I don't know, we figure out nuclear fusion. I don't know what it is. Less time in a spreadsheet and less time debugging code and more time solving really important challenges, because we have now the hours in the day and the intellectual capacity to solve them.
Yeah, I don't think these coding tools are getting rid of developers ever. I think they're going to allow developers to be more efficient, be able to write, hopefully, we're not there yet, better code, less buggy code, maybe help us maintain and manage that code a little bit better. I don't see it, at least not in my lifetime right now. I don't think any developer today should be worried about their job at any level.
I agree wholeheartedly. It's very much our viewpoint, and it's why sometimes we get asked the question of why are you building technology with any kind of developer focus. I mean, literally, I get that question from venture capitalists and others who assume that developers are going to be obsolete in the next few years. So what's the point? And I believe that is incredibly short-sighted for many reasons. Number one being the tech is certainly not there yet, but two being I think, as you said, I think it will just change what developers are working on and expand their capability for being efficient and producing code in new ways, but not to become in a totally autonomous system.
It gets, from a coding perspective, I focus all my time on making code that is readable, that somebody else can maintain, with structure, with rules, guide, okay, all that stuff, right? And when you start using tooling that generates code, then that code isn't being generated for readability. It's being generated for a machine to read. Let's say not for a human to read. And so in my brain, the tooling still has to help developers with that ultimate goal of somebody's got to come in and maintain this. Now, maybe the day that machines can maintain it, who cares sort of what, now it has to be optimized for machine readability. But, that switch is going to have to happen. I don't know how long that takes. I almost don't even see it happening. Plus, you can say all you want. Most of this planet is still being run by COBOL programs and Fortran programs, and AI is not coming in anytime soon there. So,
It's true. It's true.
right.
I mean, there's many examples of that in which you realize how much of the current tech stack of the world is not nearly as AI friendly or advanced as people would want to believe.
No, and all the legacy software out there that doesn't have tests right now, and so there's work out there for everybody.
Yeah.
No panic there.
We are very much betting on developers, and I think the AI companies for developers that we admire, I think are betting on that too. I love Cursor, and there's others that I know our team uses that I think are about augmenting the work of developers, not believing that they're going to be a full replacement in the near future.
I've always been kind of anti code gen because it's so hard to maintain and manage. And so, even with that type of tooling in my world, I'm not necessarily against it. I just want to know how are you going to maintain it when it's in production? How are you going to find the bug? How are you going to fix it? Are you allowed to touch that again? Like if you can answer all those questions, you can get me to say yes to some code gen. But if you can't, I'm just, and this is sometimes I'm saying I'm aging out, Brooke. I'm aging out because I just know better at this point. Like not know better, but I can read the tea leaves, right? On what's coming.
And I have a 58-year-old CTO, so I think you guys would see eye to eye on. And I would not argue he's aging out. So I think he brings the full perspective that people with shorter careers might not have, where you can see the whole picture and the forest for the trees a little bit.
Yeah, I
So
want you to
don't so
ask
don't
him.
don't count yourself out yet.
Now, I want you to ask him if he ever feels like he's aging out. Like the ideas that are being pushed are just like I can't get behind them. That's when I start saying I'm aging out. I just can't get behind this. And popular culture or something, right? Dev culture, all this is going in that direction. I'm just like, I'm aging out, man, because
I
yeah.
think what he would, if to speak for him, I think what he would say is, I know better. So, he kind of has put a stake in the ground there. He's like, I'm not aging out. I have a unique asset of my wisdom. And that's, he talks about that sometimes within Factory, where he likes to think about in Factory leveraging some of the best of sort of established machine learning and novel innovation alongside what has come with generative AI, but not generative AI for the sake of Gen AI. And he's like, I wouldn't have been willing to think about the problem from that perspective without the years I've spent in this industry and the recognition that trends come and go, but there are certain sort of principles and understanding that make good software. And I know what it takes to make good software.
Okay, we're like a half an hour in, and I haven't even gotten to get your backstory now. But
Right, right.
sometimes I meet people who I want to have these sort of conversations with because I don't get to meet people like you very often, Brooke.
Here at Ardan Labs, we believe in empowering companies to reach their full potential through innovative technology solutions. Trusted by small startups and Fortune 500 companies alike, we specialize in high-performance software consulting, training, staffing, development, and now AI. With over 14 years of experience, Ardan Labs has trained over 30,000 engineers and served over 1,000 companies worldwide. Whether you're mastering Go, Rust, Kubernetes, Terraform, or blockchain, we're your strategic partner for performance-grade solutions. Let's elevate your tech journey together. Reach out to Ardan Labs today.
Then let's get back into like what I love about my show here is we can kind of get a personal journey on sort of how you ended up here.
Yeah.
So I got to ask you a couple questions. I got to age you a little bit. So when did you graduate high school and what state city were you in?
High school. Wow. So I graduated high school in 2007. I am originally from Chapel Hill, North Carolina, home of UNC. But ironically, I did not go to UNC. I went to UNC's chief
Okay, but
rival.
don't jump ahead of me. Don't jump ahead
Oh,
of me.
sorry,
That's too
sorry,
far. No,
sorry.
no, no,
Yes.
no.
Well,
Way
okay.
too.
So I'm a North
No.
Carolina native from Chapel Hill.
Okay, perfect, perfect. Now I want you to clear your mind. Don't think hard. Don't think hard too hard. Give me that first memory you have of working on a computer, getting your hands on a keyboard? What's that very first memory?
Yeah, I mean, for me, being a millennial, I remember getting access to what was a Windows machine. I know we had Apple computers at school, or, Macs at school, but I don't remember exactly using them. And we must have had a computer class of some kind that was probably playing Oregon Trail in elementary school. But the real memory I have of getting really excited about a computer is that we had a Windows machine that was some big like Dell PC that sat in our basement, and we had AOL and dial-up internet, and that was the advent of AOL Instant Messenger. And I realized that I could talk to friends without needing to, at that time, no one had cell phones. So I wouldn't have been able to just call or text a friend one to one, but I could do that through a computer. And so I got very excited about the social opportunities of being a, 12-year-old girl or whatever I was on my AOL Instant Messenger on a computer.
Yeah, but where was that computer? Was it like in the living room? Your
The
parents knew what you were
basement,
doing?
the basement, yeah.
Oh, man.
My parents had a computer. My mom worked from home actually, like she was a trendsetter, before COVID, and she had a laptop of some kind, and we weren't allowed to use that. But the family computer was the big PC that was downstairs, and that was what we used for, talking on AOL and playing The Sims or whatever else was available on a machine like that.
So you had siblings, then you had to compete for the machine.
Well, so I was the oldest, and so my sister always says that the reason that I got into tech and she's in uh, healthcare is because I never let her use the computer.
That's why
So
I
I said,
always ask.
when I
Yeah.
played games or things, or even when I was on Instant Messenger, I was like, you can sit next to me and watch if you want. But I was not good at sharing. I was a typical oldest. Um, Typically hogged the computer whenever I could. And I used to sneak downstairs and use it after my parents went to bed. So
Wow.
um, I
You got in
was
trouble at all? Did you get scolded?
no,
You
no.
think they knew?
Because I always say this because I don't think at that time there was any sense of like internet safety, and
Mm.
so I don't think my parents really understood what like negative consequences they were going to be. I think they saw it as like a nice tool that I was using to maybe, get on the web or use these different games, but they didn't see it as something that was should be restricted. It wasn't there was no
Oh, it's Brooke. She ain't doing anything bad
yeah,
down
no, they
there.
didn't
It's
they
all
didn't think
good.
about it that way. They didn't there was no concept yet of screen time, and no concept yet of the ways in which now people have some negative connotations with children using computers. So, I mean, they barely. And then my middle school actually was very ahead of its time in that it had a laptop program. And so by
Mm.
seventh grade, every student was given a laptop that
Really?
they
Wow.
used in class, which had restrictions on it, like you couldn't just be on the internet doing whatever. But the intent being that they wanted us to be computer literate from the jump, and so by seventh grade, I actually had my own laptop that I had been given at school and then brought home. So
Yeah.
then I didn't even need to sneak downstairs; I just had it with me. So
Did they give you like a Windows machine or was it something?
it was a Windows machine. I'm trying to remember. It was like an Excel or something. I mean, it was. I remember how thick it was. It was like a hardcover book thickness and very heavy to carry around. We had these giant laptop cases that made us all look like little consultants running around. And as like a 13-year-old girl, like one of my shoulders was always like this.
Yeah,
So.
well, without lockers today, I picked up the book bag for the 13-year-old and I almost couldn't lift it because I didn't expect it to be. It must have weighed almost 25 pounds, 20 pounds. And
What's
I
in
was
there?
just
Because I
like,
didn't even think they had textbooks anymore.
yeah, she had one of her really thick textbooks in there.
They haven't all gone online. I thought they were all now on computers, but
I don't know why this
shows
classroom
you what
did
I
that.
know about what's happening in today's middle school classrooms. Not a
So
whole lot.
I had like I had 5 kids around at 2007. So I had being in computers, they each had a laptop with Windows on it, and there was a month that went by where I had to reinstall Windows on each of those like 2 or 3 times in that month because they kept getting viruses because these kids kept going somewhere. And I remember, I have these stories when I talk to people. I remember losing it because I didn't want to reinstall Windows again. And I took one of the laptops and I like slammed it on the floor. I was like, I am done. And I went to Best Buy and bought 5 Chromebooks for like $250 each. And I said, this is it. This is what you get now. And they were like crying. They couldn't play games. I go, yeah, but you can do homework. You got Google Docs. I don't
Right.
want to hear it.
Right.
And my life got so much better. So much
My
better.
family had a similar moment in that I don't remember what year it would have been, but do you remember the Mac that looked like kind of half a melon and then it had sort of a like artist easel sort of screen? It was
I
on the
don't remember.
cover of Time magazine, but I think my mom just liked the aesthetic. And so she decided that we were all going to become a Mac family. And so suddenly it was like a complete switch. Everyone was on Apple, and she didn't want. She'd heard that they were better for viruses and things like that, and it also meant that I think it must have been like a buy one get one situation. Though I don't really know Apple
Mm.
did that, so maybe she was just getting excited at the Apple Store. But that also meant that we got a first generation iPod, which was also this thick.
Oh, that's
So yeah,
nice.
we there was
Yeah.
like there was a moment in our family where suddenly it was like no more PCs, all Apple, and that was kind of before everyone had made the switch themselves of seeing Apple as the preferred brand. And so I remember being like annoyed that I didn't have Minesweeper anymore, things like that.
Yeah. But it's a brilliant move because, so much maintenance with those other machines,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially when the kids are going crazy. Tell me a little bit about high school. What things were you interested in high school? Were you athlete, music?
Yeah, I went to a very small high school. It was an independent school where because it was in North Carolina, it was not what you would picture for a typical prep school with uniforms and sort of the snobbery of saying, I went to, whatever X school. It was most of the kids were the offspring of professors and PhD types that were coming out of the universities in the area. And so it was very nerdy. I went to a very nerdy school. And I sometimes tell people that until I was in college, really, I kind of thought that things that happened in the movies, like a Mean Girls or, movies about high school were just sort of made up because I didn't really understand these much more complicated social dynamics. Our social dynamics were we were a small class. Even the the coolest kid in the class is pretty nerdy, pretty academically focused, trying to get into a good college. And so pretty involved in school. I didn't really follow that there would be like a world where maybe that wasn't cool at other schools. And kind of everybody in your class. So I was super, super academically motivated and actually primarily interested in not STEM classes, though I took all the STEM classes, but I wanted to do things that were much more liberal arts oriented. So I was very interested in history. Proud to say I won the history award twice. So, could put that on the resume. I was for a short time on the debate team and then won the North Carolina State Championship in debate the first time I ever was in a debate tournament. So I always had a gift for speaking and I think believed that maybe one day I'd be a lawyer. And I did play sports. I did the musical. I did the play. We were just kind of a school where everyone was just very involved. I was involved in student government. Um,
But
I
you
was
enjoyed all of it. It wasn't like, oh, I got to do this play. Like you
No,
enjoyed.
I mean, it was
Enjoy it.
part of the experience. I mean, I wouldn't lie and say that some of it was also about the expectations that were, the expectations at my school are very high. It actually kind of goes all the way back to what we were talking about with work-life balance. Like, I don't think I've ever been taught that I deserve work-life balance because that was not the culture of my school. My school was you are supposed to pursue things with a sense of excellence in all things that you do, and the outcome of that is that hopefully you will end up at a strong university program and be a productive member of society and achieving high excellence in that category. And so whatever that costs you to do, that matters more than whether you have time to sort of relax and take a break. So We were definitely a hardworking school. I thought my first year of college was definitely easier than many of my years that I had in high school.
So the girls, I number all the kids because there's too many of them. So 6 and 7, who's a senior in high school and a seventh grader, they're in a school now that's very much like that. Your whole your academics are all about getting into college, getting into the best college you can. In fact, the school had her apply to 12 universities.
Yeah, I
And,
believe it.
and, but like in my world, you apply to at most four, maybe three, you know, and they've got her applying to like 12 universities. And there was a big part of me that was like, yeah, but aren't you missing out a little bit on high school and your childhood, or everything is so sort of demanding in school? But I see that they're doing well. They're like thriving in that environment, so it's nice.
I mean, I tell people all the time, I if I lived in North Carolina, I would probably choose this school for my son. Not because I would say that it was a place where, I mean, I have good friends from there and I have a lot of happy memories from that experience, but it was also really, really hard. But it taught me the like important life message, which is that I can do hard things. And I think that there are many people that I've encountered both in college and in career who I don't know have been challenged or get uncomfortable when things get hard and want to sort of pull back from that. And um, I think embracing that sort of ethos is something that was sort of in my DNA from such a young age that I'm glad that I have it. It has really served me well as far as, and I would believe would serve your children well too. I think it's an important, it's something that gets sometimes lost in uh, today's culture.
But I also think it's in their personality. We don't have to. I mean, the 17-year-old, I have to ask, what do you have for homework tonight? How long that's going to take? She's not good with time management. But I think it also has to be in your personality, because you can only have a parent sort of correcting you so much before you just start to really
For
withdraw.
sure. I'm I'm curious how this will play out as my son actually attends school. You know, he's in preschool now, but uh, all the things I believe about the education system and what's in the best interest of kids will probably go completely out the window because he will have a completely different personality than me, and all the things that I would assume would work. You know, I'm preparing myself to be extremely humbled by however that
So
goes.
I tell this to everybody: the kid that is the most like you is going to be the hardest one to parent. That's who you're going to fight with. That's who you're going to struggle with. That's who you're going to have your biggest battles with. The kids that are not like you, I don't know why, they're just easier.
It's
Start
like you're looking in a mirror at your own flaws and wondering how you're like I didn't fix those in myself, so how am I going to fix them to someone else?
and you can't, because they're like you. And they
Yeah,
do all the things that irk you because they're behaving like you.
yeah,
It's unbelievable. It's
yeah,
unbelievable.
yeah. I mean, parenting's a lot like startup and founder life. It's humbling all the time. I like to say that I have two startups, where and Factory is my or I have two children, depending on how you look at it. My child is my startup, and Factory is my child, and they both have a lot of the same challenges.
No, even like your business partners, because when the kids are like, how's your business wife doing? You know,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
they know like that's that same type of relationship, right? That you have.
for
Um,
sure. I mean, sometimes we joke when we're having like one-on-one founders meetings that we sometimes call it like couples therapy because you're that intense of a relationship all the time, and yeah, it's a lot.
my business partner just like last week, he's like, Bill, stop bullshitting me. We've been married for 12 years. I know you. Right. And I just started laughing because, like, yeah, why am I trying to deceive him? He already knows. So you're about to graduate high school. What's going on in your head? What is it? I imagine college is the only option, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Based on,
I was not someone who saw another path than that. You know, my school was the kind of school where 100% of the graduates went on to a four-year college, or if they didn't, it was because they were doing some kind of specialized gap year, and all of that. And as I mentioned, I was not a STEM oriented kid in high school, nor was I interested in pursuing that in college. I really wanted to go to a college that gave me a well-rounded experience, recognizing that I already knew even at this age that the path for people that were liberal arts sort of engaged and less STEM engaged was more narrow, and that the job and opportunities were often going to people who, were going after those kinds of disciplines. And so I wanted to go to certainly a school that gave me the most amount of options given where my interests lay. So it was less about, oh, I want to pursue this particular major, and more, this is going to be a program that, has a lot of different career opportunities connected to, who recruits there. Also, I cared a lot about the experience of the college itself, and was related to the decision I made was to go somewhere that had sports, had nice weather, had a few other sort of like livable factors attached to it on top of its academic reputation and its career opportunities. But a big part of it for me was picking where I felt I'd be most set up for success in the long term.
And where did you end up
So
going?
as I sort of not buried the lead, I sort of teased at the beginning. I ended up going to Duke, which was,
Okay.
I think, a surprise to everybody, but particularly my family, because as I mentioned, we're from Chapel Hill. My dad taught at UNC. He's a UNC
Yeah.
alum. My family go to every UNC football game, most of UNC basketball games. They're very passionate UNC fans, and Duke is the hated rival that's only a few miles away. But when I took a step back from like writing my checklist of what I wanted in a school, Duke happened to check a lot of those boxes, and it seemed kind of foolish not to pick it just because of a sports rivalry. So that's how I ended up at Duke.
So there, I saw a commercial last night during the national championship game. I do not know what company it was
I
for.
think it was a insurance commercial.
You saw it? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's the boyfriend goes
Yeah,
over.
wearing the
Yeah,
Duke. Oh my
yes.
God. My
Yeah,
wife and
it's
I were
the
laughing.
family's all in their UNC gear, and it says, you should double check before. It must have been an insurance thing, but I can't. This is a bad commercial if you can't remember the brand name, but I do remember the UNC Duke rivalry being part of the storyline.
My wife and I laughed so hard when we saw that. So hard. Like you should know better. It was like the messaging was almost like you should know better.
It's true. It's true. So
I have
it's.
to
I mean,
look it up.
I don't talk to my family usually on game days. And interestingly enough, one of my best friends from high school, she has season tickets to Duke UNC at Duke. Well, she has season tickets to Duke in general. And so I get the ticket every time for the Duke UNC game at Duke. And when I fly in for that game, so that game's going to be February 1, so I'll be there in just a few weeks. Uh, I don't see my family on that trip. I literally go to North Carolina for like 2 days and spend the entire time in Durham at Duke, and it's like completely separate from spending time with my family. It's
Well,
that serious.
I hear you. My and number 6 is like applying to schools, and I'm a Notre Dame fan.
I'm
And
sorry.
no. I was we can that's a whole other. I am not sad about last night, but I'm not going to get into that. But I'm not sad. We had a great season, and I'm really happy for the season we had. I hate Ohio State because we can't beat them, but we'll get there. But I told number 6 there are certain schools you're not allowed to go to, like Michigan,
Yeah,
you know, and I'd be really worried about USC and any school that I thought could beat us. I can't have that in the house,
yeah, yeah.
right? So like
It's fair.
I get it.
It's my father was very supportive, and he even let me put a Duke sticker on his car for a period of time, which he took off the day that I graduated. But I always
Wow.
tell the story that my sister did go to UNC, the younger sister who wasn't allowed to play any computer games. And at her graduation, my dad like openly wept. It was the most beautiful day of his entire life. And they played, going to Carolina in my mind. My dad is so emotional. I'm like, I don't remember this reaction at my graduation. So he's
I
very proud
can
of both of us, loves us
yes.
both. But, it was a special moment for him to have one child at least go to UNC.
Well, I couldn't get into Notre Dame. None of my kids, the first 5 kids, couldn't get into Notre Dame. Um, Number 6 and 7 are my stepkids from my second marriage. But I had number 6 apply to St. Mary's, which is a sister school.
Right.
They got a 5-year engineering program where you end up with a degree from both Notre Dame, and she got in. So I have a whole wall now of like acceptance letters and things. But my problem, Brooke, is that if she gets into Georgia Tech, like she's not going to go to St. Mary's.
So yeah, what
But
are you gonna root for? You know, it's tough.
no, I'm rooting for Notre Dame. There's no Georgia
It's
Tech.
not ambiguous for you.
That's not even that. I just I want some attachment to the university, you know.
I
And
get
like
it.
this is my chance. Yeah, just have some
If your
attachment.
program sounds attractive, you know, if it means that
2 degrees.
yeah, two
Yeah.
degrees, and so
And they gave her like half the tuition off, and it's like
that's a
somewhat
good
reasonable.
deal. I
I
mean,
know, but I gotta wait till March. Georgia Tech
okay.
doesn't announce anything till March, so
Okay. Well,
I'm in
I don't
pain.
want to root for her to not get into Georgia Tech because
Neither do I.
I would like her to have choices, but I hope she chooses wherever she's happiest.
Yes, and I told her that. I said I could live with you at Georgia Tech because they can't beat Notre Dame in football.
No, that's not a concern. They can't beat Duke in basketball, so yeah, I don't worry too much about
Exactly.
that.
Exactly. Except the Duke football team has gotten very good over the last 4 or 5 years. They're one of these spoiler teams now. Like,
They have. I mean, for us with Duke football, we're always just happy to not be an embarrassment. So it's actually pretty fun to be a Duke football fan sometimes because the expectations are so low. You don't have to do a whole lot for people to feel like we did enough. If we have a winning season, everyone is usually, you know, satisfied by that. It's not like basketball where even a Final Four can sometimes feel like a disappointment if we don't go to the national championship.
yeah, the expectations there, but I think the football program has gotten really good recently, and I don't want to play them. They're like Syracuse at this point. They're gonna have 2 or 3 good games, and you just hope it's not against you.
But you Notre Dame took our good quarterback, so um,
Yeah, we did. And we got to the national championship game with them. So
yeah, no, I mean he was.
there you
But I
go.
mean the fact that he started his career at Duke shows you that the
Yeah,
program has improved.
exactly. So you all right, so just because of time here. So you graduate from university. Are you working internships? Are you working at all? Like, what's your plan as you're leaving? You're doing a 4-year stint there, right? So, and then by that time, it's what, 2011?
Yeah, I graduated college in 2011, so I missed the Great Recession, thankfully, and didn't. I mean,
Yeah,
it was we were coming out of it, but it wasn't like people I knew who graduated in '08 where they lost their job basically immediately and things of that nature. Uh, I had only a few things that I knew for sure. I wanted to live in New York City and not live in North Carolina. I wanted to have a job that I felt was very dynamic and fast paced. I assumed that because of my skill set, I would need to be a lawyer or, you know, a social worker or something that was, you know, liberal arts oriented. I didn't really know at the time that there were jobs for people in the tech world that didn't have anything to do with building code. And what was interesting is that in college, you know, I was always still very internet centric. I, you know, learned like many women of my generation, I learned HTML and CSS so I could customize my MySpace and my WordPress sites and things of that nature, my Tumblr. Um, I was very active on social media. I was very interested in where social media was going. In college, the internships that I did have were actually around sort of marketing tech. I worked for a company that was doing an ad network. I worked for an ad agency and you know was looking at their digital strategy, and a lot of that was related to sort of being at the age that I was, that I could understand what was going on in the very nascent at the time social world. I mean, this was early Facebook, very early Instagram. You know, like Instagram was literally just filters. It wasn't acquired yet by Facebook. Google Plus, certainly Twitter, certainly the you know Vine on Twitter for a period of time. Just a very different social media landscape. And the way it worked out is that I moved to New York with the intention of actually going to graduate school, and fortuitously had a conversation with a family friend who my mom had mentored at an earlier stage in her career. Her name was Cass Lazaro, and she was a serial entrepreneur that had been working on a new project with her husband, another entrepreneur, around social media engagements and applications. So this was literally like the age of Farmville and things of
Mm.
that nature on Facebook, which when I talk to people in younger generations, they get very blank stares as to what I'm talking about. But they hadn't figured out yet. No one knew how to monetize Facebook. Facebook didn't even have ads. They were just starting to get into the ad space. They were very limited. They didn't have the news feed yet. It was still, you needed a college email. Eventually, you could have an high school email. They were just opening up more broadly. All these different factors were sort of evolving. And so I kind of talked my way into a job there with no experience other than I, again, was someone that kind of knew what was going on in social because I was living it on a daily basis. And that HTML and CSS actually turned out to be handy because what I essentially did in that first job was project management for customers who were building these applications. So the company was called Buddy Media. They built software that allowed basically anybody to sort of build their own Facebook app. A lot of that was SaaS, but it was really needed a lot of like professional services on top of it. And so I worked with those customers and getting them kind of the whole end-to-end project for their application. And that was really my
Did you
realization
enjoy
that
that?
I could work in tech.
You enjoyed that work with the client, getting them what they needed, and then
Yes,
work with the
that
tech
was a
people?
huge breakthrough for me that what I was good at was people for one, and that is important in the tech world because not everyone wants to be in front of people, nor should everyone be in front of people. And I was good at being the translator of the technical concepts back to the non-technical end user or customer. And I liked that role in terms of enabling those customers to be successful in this space without, deep resources or background in tech or social at that point.
What
So
scares me, Brooke, is that you won that debate competition. My guess is you are doing a tremendous amount of sort of negotiation and debate, maybe without even realizing it, to get people to compromise on both sides of that fence.
well, that has been true through my whole career. I mean, skipping ahead, but my everything that I have done has had some element of partnership or negotiation and figuring out how to bring parties together. What I will say is that to me the hallmark of success isn't sort of compromising or sort of the zero sum game, though sometimes that can be fun to play, but it's always about creating a larger pie, more shared value. And so I've always wanted to work in roles and in companies and positions that allow me to do that.
So, how long are you with this company developing those like PM skills?
So, timeline wise, the company was actually acquired within a year of me joining by Salesforce. So, very quickly, I went from sort of fairly mature startup to behemoth SaaS company that is arguably at this time the most impressive sales organization ever built. They were a machine of sort of excellence, and so much of what is now sort of taken for granted in software sales and in the SaaS industry was originally designed by Salesforce. I talk to people about that a lot where people often ask, they're like, I don't even like Salesforce's software. Why are they so like why is Salesforce like eating the whole world? Why is their building the biggest building in the city?
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's because they were sales led in everything that they did. They were customer centric in everything that they did. And that made them incredibly effective. And so for me, what was amazing was because I, stayed on after the acquisition and they decided to start incorporating what they acquired from Buddy Media and a few other companies into a tech stack that they called Marketing Cloud, where they were trying to expand beyond just the CRM use cases, but into more marketing automation workflows and sort of being more of like a customer data platform and that focus. Um, I got kind of this like rapid education in all things software, sales and account and strategy. Um, and so following the Buddy acquisition, I was at Salesforce in total for about 5 years,
Wow, it's a long
and
time.
I played a lot of different roles. My favorite actually being in the last job I had there was for a team that was called the Red Accounts team. And what that meant were For accounts of a certain size, so usually like in the seven figures of annual revenue, not small accounts, they were accounts that were at risk of churning, which would where a lot of Salesforce attention was starting to go was on the renewal and churn side because they had taken such large market shares broadly. It was less focused on sort of new business. And for these accounts, the churn risk was so high that the account team felt that they needed additional help to prevent losing the account. And so what that meant were these were people that were extremely unhappy with their Salesforce experience. And it could be because they didn't like their account person, they had so many bugs, they felt that there was a product feature that they had been asking for that they never got, many issues. I mean, I had people that wanted to know Mark Benioff's personal address so that they could send him like hate mail, and I would have to like report that to security.
Oh my God.
And so yeah, so my job was really to like, everyone on the team was sort of assigned a certain number of accounts, and it was basically to figure out like what is the strategy, what resources do we need, what executive sponsors, what case what do we maybe need to make to the product team to build feature functionality that would save this account if it would even matter. Um, the analogy I would give is it's sort of like if you go to a restaurant and you're unhappy, so you ask to speak to the manager. I would be that manager who was then trying to figure out how to make the customer what the customer might be saying, which often was different from what would actually make them happy because a lot of it is just about sort of human feeling and being heard.
They're
And
emotional, yeah, at that
yeah,
point.
it's a lot of
Yeah.
times it's just someone wanting to vent, and it's like once they were able to say their piece and felt like someone like empathized with their
Listened.
problems, that was often like a good start as far as
Yeah.
improving things. So, a lot of people when they heard that was my job thought it was insane, and I loved it. I loved the challenge of it. I loved the turnaround stories. I loved sort of the pace of it and the pressure because usually these things weren't like raised like months before their expiration date. They'd be like, this account's going to churn in 30 days unless, we pull a miracle out of thin air. And I liked doing those kinds of magic tricks.
Yeah. Did you ever feel like a punching bag on at all?
Probably like initially, but honestly, if anything, I felt like I was the right person to be in that role. Like I think I'm inherently try to always see things from a customer's perspective, and you can usually empathize with some, we've all had bad like customer support experiences, and oftentimes you just wanted someone to acknowledge how you felt about it.
Yeah. I when I know I'm overly emotional and I'm going to make that customer service call, the first thing out of my mouth is, I know this didn't happen because of you.
Right,
I'm
right,
I'm not angry at you. I'm not yelling at you. If I raise my voice, I'm sorry. And that can go a long way with the person on the other end too,
right.
because
You
they
because
relax.
that person is the only person right now who's trying to help you. I came into every interaction basically for the mindset of I am trying to find a solution for this customer, and obviously it's to the company's best interest to solve it, but I'm the only one right now that can help you, so you yelling at me is probably not going to make that go
Motivate
faster.
you. Yeah, 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 yeah. So that's amazing. I mean, you moved into a big company, an enterprise company, someone that was a company that was, and you learned a lot on the sales, and you learned how to put out those fires. But what causes you to leave after 5 years? What year is it now? Is it like 2017,
It would
2018?
be, yes, it's a 2016. And what happens is that, so in this time, I got married to someone that my husband, still husband, I'm acting like he got replaced or something. My current husband and I got married in 2015. We had, in that time, moved from New York to Chicago. I had stayed with Salesforce and worked at the Chicago office. My husband worked for a company in the ad tech space, and he had the opportunity to move to Melbourne, Australia,
Wow,
where they were
Melbourne.
looking to have someone who had experience opening a new office and experience with this particular kind of retail customer. And he was like the perfect Venn diagram of that. And so, sort of this like once in a lifetime chance to go. And I could have probably stayed with Salesforce. They did, have people in the more satellite offices, but they were often roles that I didn't find as exciting as the work that I was doing sort of closer to the US. And so I moved to Australia with sort of not a plan of what I was going to do exactly, but saw this as kind of a interesting opportunity to find, you know, something maybe completely different than what I was doing. And as it turned out, at that time, Slack, which was still very much a new company, even in the United States, not a mature business, had just started building a sales team after Stuart Butterfield, the CEO of Slack, would continually tell people that they would never need a sales team because their product would just magically sell itself. Um, they had decided to open their Asia Pacific headquarters in Melbourne, which is actually pretty unusual.
Wow.
They don't usually
Really?
they don't usually put tech headquarters in Melbourne. They put them in Sydney or in Singapore or wherever. Um, but they chose Melbourne for whatever reason, and they were basically like getting that office off the ground with
That's
like
wild.
nothing. And I ended up joining as one of their first, not just their first sales hires in Asia Pacific, but really like one of their first sales hires in the United States. I mean, the sales team at that time, or sorry, globally. I mean, the entire global sales team at that time would have fit, at like a 12-person table, and grew to be a very, very large organization, many of whom were actually ex Salesforce and then were actually Salesforce when Salesforce acquired Slack. Um, so I started working there in a role
Fi-
where
Finding you in Melbourne must have freaked out. I would have freaked out to find somebody
I,
like
I
you.
will I will admit, I will toot my own horn in saying that it was not a hard interview and that I think they were pretty happy that I was there. Um, it was a good fit from the jump, and it
Yeah.
was really one of my first sort of 0 to 1 experiences because even though Slack was not a seed company at that point and had users, the business model had not been sorted out. As I said, there were no sales processes whatsoever. Australia and Asia Pacific was completely greenfield, and they set up the territory at that time to be everything between New Zealand and India, which was insane because
Like, I,
none of those
yeah.
places are close together and they're culturally very different. In India, we would be trying to sell licenses where the cost of a Slack license was more than sometimes the people were getting paid. We had Japan, which was a really strong market because of its tech adoption, but as you know, culturally very idiosyncratic in terms of its business practices and language. I was running like a sales team out of Tokyo, not speaking Japanese or knowing anything about business culture in Japan. So it was amazing. It was so much fun. I mean, it was
Wow.
some of the best years of my like working life. Also, I'll just say this because we're just talking about a lot of different things. Slack people, nicest people. Everyone should hire them because they're just some of the best. It's a company that drew a lot of just people who I feel proud to have called colleagues, and I'm
Nice.
very glad that that company ended up being successful because the people involved really were great people, and Microsoft really came in and took a big bite out of their market share, and that's always disappointing because um, it felt like there was a lot of cool things that were happening at Slack for so long.
I back in 2014, I started a Slack group for the Go programming language, and I had asked them several times to like upgrade our account for history and stuff, and they, at some point, they eventually did it, and I was so grateful for them to sort of start supporting community spaces.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
yeah.
I have nothing negative to say about Slack at all. The only thing I would say is I was using a product that would allow me to do remote screen share for programming
Mm.
before the VS. I forgot what it was called. The product was so good. And Slack bought it, and I got excited because I was going to be able to start these sessions. And then, like, it never happened.
Oh, that's always
And
disappointing when like an acquisition happens and then it doesn't get integrated into the stack.
no, it's like this product got thrown away. It was one of the best products I was using at the time to pair program with somebody remotely. It was sad. I can't remember the name of it, but that was sad. But no, I think that's awesome. 2000, you said it was 50, you got married in 15, so you're
Yeah,
there.
so we moved in 16. Um, and then my husband's stint was 2 years, and we had to decide whether we were going to basically stay in Australia. It was like kind of option one, which was on the table. Great place to live, highly recommend. If it wasn't on the far side of the world, might be where we still are. I think as you'd expect, if you're going to live in Australia, you kind of have to really commit to living in Australia. Like your life's going to be there. You're not flying back to the United States on a regular basis.
Well, I mean, you got a 15-hour direct flight from Sydney. I mean, you
East
could have
East
worse things.
East Coast is hard. So, the fact that,
No, East Coast
families
for
on the East Coast and all of that,
forget
I
about
would,
East
I
Coast.
would, you fly 15 hours from Australia to California. You've got another 5-hour flight to, the East Coast after that. It's a little
Uh,
brutal.
I fly to Singapore from Miami. That's 35 hours door to door,
Yes.
no
Yeah.
matter what you slice it.
It's tough. It's
Yeah,
tough.
I hear you. I hear you.
This year I had a lot of Asian travel and I think I circumnavigated the globe many times in terms of mileage and it's a slog to get over there. So we made the decision to come back to the United States and I made the decision to get an MBA, which was a little unorthodox for someone who had primarily been doing sort of sales and account type work, particularly in tech. Like tech is not the most MBA driven.
Why
But
did
what
you
I
think you
had,
needed it? Why did you think you needed the
I
MBA?
needed it. I felt that I needed it because I knew that I wanted to one day found something and I wanted the actual skills. Like for me, it wasn't a credibility signal, though it's not, doesn't hurt. I didn't want to change industries, which is often why people choose to get an MBA. I definitely wanted to stay in technology, but I wanted to actually have taken courses in finance. I ended up being a finance major in business school and I wanted to have some of that like deep quantitative expertise that I didn't get in college. That I in college, was a history major and I loved that and it was great, but I took like the stat classes that the non-quantitative people take and I wanted to, understand how corporate finance works. I wanted to know how to do, basic calculations around, net present value. I wanted to I applied to business school very much with the mindset of I want to do like entrepreneurial things in business school. So I focused a lot on that. And I think the last thing was that I did want to be able to do in a larger corporate environment roles like corporate development and partnerships, which often do have MBA requirements. So to that segue, like after I got my MBA and I went back to work. The job I took was at Google, and that team was very heavily MBA or people who had done like finance and consulting, and so kind of got the experience
So
through.
you did the MBA full time? Was it virtual or
No,
were
it
you?
was in person, so I went back to Duke for it. Graduated in 2020, which is the pandemic graduation. So my graduation was virtual.
Uh,
uh, Otherwise was a full-time program. And because it was the pandemic, I had done my MBA internship at Google and then for the same team. And then I literally started at Google the next day after graduation. So I didn't take any time off. And we moved to California maybe a month later because we expected that, we'll be back in the office by the end of the summer. So we should be back there. Um,
so I guess the pandemic made all that possible because that company for sure isn't virtual. I mean, or
No.
wasn't.
So yeah, it hadn't been virtual. And
Right.
I'm grateful that I had the internship experience in person because I knew I had met my team, I met my manager, I knew everyone pretty well before I started. My husband ended up working for Meta and he did not actually meet any of his team in person for like over a year. So very
Wow.
different kind of starting point. And I had at least some context for the team and the background and all of that. So yes, I was virtual for quite some time, but we were actually in the Bay Area. We picked an apartment based on like commuting to Mountain View and all these things that didn't exactly materialize. So
How did you go into that Google interview? Because it's an intense, at least on the programming side. I mean, I don't know about other
well,
positions.
it's funny because the story I always tell, it is very intense. It's an intimidating interview. I would say interviews for me have always been a strength, and so I don't usually take a lot of nerves into them, but I knew that this one was a pretty high stakes one and pretty competitive. And the funny thing is that the person who ended up being my manager did the like case study interview where they presented sort of this problem and basically asked me how I would solve it and like I was just to walk through sort of my thinking and all of that. And it was specific to that team and that product area. It wasn't like sometimes you hear about these Google case studies where it's like how, what would you do if you were shrunk to this size and thrown into a blender? It wasn't that kind of question. I think they've kind of done away with a lot of that. It was related to the business of selling, Android devices. And so, I answered the question, all of that. I, find out later I got the job. When I start, like one of my very first conversations with my manager was, by the way, like, what was the answer to the case study? Like, this is what I said at the time, but I've always been, wondering what was the actual sort of right answer. And he literally looked at me and goes, I don't know. He's like, that's your project for the summer. That's why I asked you. He's like, I don't know the answer. He's like, there isn't a right answer because that's what we actually, he's like, I'm about to tell you about how the fact that you're going to solve this over like 3 months when I basically, wanted you to give me like a right answer in, 10 minutes. So,
Wow. Wow.
yeah,
That's cool though.
yeah.
I think that's
That,
cool.
so that was my interview experience, which was they basically gave me an unsolvable question and wanted to see how I would tackle it, knowing that even they weren't quite sure how they would tackle it.
And how your brain works and how you communicate that. And I'm
Yes,
sure
of
they
course,
challenged you during that and how you took that feedback. Like all that stuff's important, right?
completely.
So how long are you at Google then working that? Because you
So
got
I
there
was at Google
2017
until
or 20. Yeah.
2023,
Okay.
and uh, I left. I had no intention of leaving Google. I loved my team. I loved that experience deeply. I really felt like I was influencing products that were affecting billions of people, which is kind of the best part of working at Google. The only reason I ever even considered leaving was before something more entrepreneurial and more cutting edge and, kind of bigger scope. And that opportunity kind of presented itself when a very mysterious recruiting email came to me from a company called Humane, which at that time was so in stealth, they did not allow people to see a demo of the product until after you agreed to join the company.
Wow.
So all you knew during interviews was, you could kind of guess a little bit what they were trying to do from the interview questions. Like I could tell they needed support with like telcos, which, was related to my background, and that they needed someone to help with LLMs. And so I knew it was AI. And I knew that the pedigree of the team was really strong. I knew that the founders had come from the iPhone team at Apple and had worked on a lot of the most important products at Apple, that they were very well regarded. I knew that they were very well funded. I mean, they were already a series, I guess, a B company when I interviewed with them, even without launching a product. So they were in a good
Wow.
position. And so it was very much like a leap of faith to say, well, I really want to be working on something that is really new and potentially game changing, and AI is certainly in that space. And I had the opportunity to then be involved with their partnerships initiatives, which for them was very far reaching and kind of everything that was external. So, working directly with the LLMs, working directly with the compute providers like Azure and Google, working with the enterprise opportunities, the telcos, kind of all of the above. So
What does your husband say that you want to kind of get back in startup mode?
I think we've always had sort of a feeling of I've wanted to do this, um, and there's never going to be a good time. I mean, at that point, his son was was he one? He's 2023 two, so or not even two when I started at Humane. And I would think most people would argue that's a pretty bad time just to go to a startup, but you don't get to always choose when opportunities present themselves, and the nice thing is that we do have a balance in that I don't think both of us could do startups at once. And so, he's the one working for the cushy corporate job right now, and I'm the one doing the high risk, crazy stuff.
That's yeah. I try to tell people all the time, you're never ready for these things. If you wait until you're ready, you have that idiocracy movie, right? I mean,
Yeah,
right? If you're always waiting for you to be ready. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, but the beginning of it's really. Have you seen that movie,
I
Idiocracy?
haven't seen it, but I know the concept.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think it's when opportunities come, you got to grab them if you're knowing what it entails. But having a partner that is going to support you is that's amazing because it's going to suck a large amount of your time
no,
to do
I'm
it
I'm
right.
I'm very lucky. Especially being a female founder and other things, I tell people all the time, I'm very lucky. The spouse that I have is someone who is very supportive, takes a very active role in our home life and our childcare, all of those things. I I did not know to pick those things in a partner when, I met him at 18 years old in college, but I'm glad that it worked it worked out that way.
So tell me how you get from Humane to Infactory, because this is the next jump.
Yeah. So that came from working really closely with Ken, where if you think of Humane as two distinct moonshots, Humane on the hardware side, making a bet that you can make a miniaturized, screenless wearable with a laser projector and lots of challenges with thermals and battery life and what can you do on device versus the cloud and many challenges related to sort of its size and its form factor. And then another moonshot, which is in lieu of a traditional operating system, this device is going to basically use LLMs as the operating system to generate many of the workflows and services that people would expect from a wearable device, like asking questions, the way we've gotten used to asking Siri and Alexa questions, or, calling an Uber or playing music, whatever that looks like. And that part of the equation was the part that Ken was focusing his attention on and trying to understand where how far the LMs could take us, what their capabilities were, were all the sort of the techniques and advances of the time that were improving what you could get from an LLM. So, retrieval augmented generation and using vector databases and fine tuning and kind of everything. And as part of that, he was supporting a lot of our efforts with telco partners and potential enterprise partners that saw the potential of the form factor and wanted to use it in an enterprise setting, recognizing that we initially envisioned the device for consumers. And as he and I spent time collaborating on a lot of those sort of initiatives and projects, what we kept finding was that there was this issue, there's wedge between what people wanted to get from LLMs and what LLMs were actually good at. And also on the enterprise side, there was an issue of just simple trust, like the need for accuracy and predictability and repeatability is so much higher for a lot of the use cases that were of interest, and the software just wasn't there. So the more we started talking about that problem space, the more we recognized that that was really a critical key that was going to be needed to make many of the sort of interesting enterprise use cases that were most relevant to critical industries work in the AI age, and didn't have a lot to do with building consumer hardware. So he and I made the choice that this was something that we felt really passionate about, and a major sort of paradigm shift in how software had been developed to date that we wanted to be involved in. And so we left together, with kind of this idea and this problem to solve and started Infactory.
So now you've got an idea for a product, you got an idea for a platform. You have experience because you've tried to build some of this, but you got to build a team. You got to start building tech. You got to give me a few minutes of great, I want to start a company. Now what?
Well, here's a few of the good things, which is that if Ken Crescendo wasn't CTO of Infactory, I don't think his day-to-day would look that much different, in that the man just wants to be coding. He just can't help himself as far as fingers on keyboard building. And so in that sense, it was sort of easy, because I think what happens oftentimes when people start a company is that if they've been in a leadership role for a long time, they might actually be kind of removed from the building side. And so now they have to kind of get back into it. And that's often the side that some people find to be more tedious, or more of kind of the grunt work side of it. That's exactly where Ken wants to be. So he basically, as soon as we were no longer affiliated with our previous employer, he was building. He bought a bigger computer and was going. And so so much of the progress we've made from an R&D perspective and from a patentable technology perspective really just stems from pure sort of sweat equity that Ken has put into it.
So what are you doing while Ken is writing as quickly as he can, tech, demos? hopefully not throwaway stuff. Like, what are
Right.
you doing? Because he needs a month, he needs a couple of months to get there, right?
I am focused at that stage on basically like two things. One is finding the initial team members, and in our case, wanting to be as lean as we possibly can be, and recognizing that we don't want to hire for things that we don't actually need. Like, every hire needs to be because without that person, we wouldn't be successful. And then ultimately moving them then into an investment phase. We bootstrapped for a short period of time, but it was never our intent to do that for too long because, as we've discussed earlier, everything right now is about speed. So, and talent is really expensive in this space. It's very competitive. You need to be able to pay people to start working on these projects. So one of the biggest things that I did was I got our third co-founder, Felipe Abello, who fleshed out for us the entrepreneurial experience. So he is a YC alum. He was on the founding team at Rappi, which is one of the biggest unicorns to come out of Latin America, sort of the DoorDash of Latin America. And he was very good at understanding sort of the 0 to 1 mindset and like what are the actual steps you need to take for a company that is in this stage. And so he was a logical fit. And he's also a bridge in many ways in that he is technical in does a lot of like front end type of work, has done that for a lot of roles. He's not going to be deep on like the core R&D work that Ken is doing, but he could accelerate building a website, building kind of the application layer. And then so we had Felipe on the team, and that was one of my focus areas, and then ultimately growing a broader team. And then the other side was doing our seed round, which was interesting because we basically made the decision to do a seed round with a deck. So, which is like not necessarily what I would recommend, but I think we felt we didn't want to wait for getting traction in a prototype. We felt like we had other things in our camp that we could lean on. We weren't kids coming out of Stanford dorm room. We had some credibility already.
I know. Let's face it. Let's face it. You had names.
Yeah. Yeah.
That of people who accomplished amazing things already.
Right.
You didn't
right.
have to prove yourself.
Right.
You just had to sell the idea, right? Like,
that's right. So
how did that feel to be around, be able to get to know these people and be around these people and then be a part of something that they wanted to build?
You mean in the Infactory context, or?
Yeah. Like, I've done startups before, but I've never been able to do startups with people that are that accomplished. Like,
that's
right?
yes, yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah.
That
I feel very lucky. I feel one of the best parts about it is that I learn something basically every day. And I, from a personal just satisfaction perspective, you're never bored. I think though it makes the three founders a good team is that we all recognize our strengths and we all also know our weaknesses. Ken and I started working together partly because Ken has always understood that just because he is a technical genius and possibly one of the most intelligent people, like almost definitely one of the most intelligent people I've ever met, he also understands he doesn't want to really be in front of investors, like he doesn't want to deal with the board meetings, and he doesn't want to go to conferences and sell. Like, that's not his skill set, and it's not the place he wants to be spending his time. And he recognizes that it itself is a skill and necessary for getting a startup off the ground, which is not the case of every engineer that I've ever met. So I've met many engineers who are like, I can do kind of all of those functions and wear all those hats, and some of them can't. Some of them are, we're all more than just like a single skill set, but I think we are very good at recognizing what talent, in hiring for other talent, what talent we don't have, what talent, will augment our own, what's complementary, all of that.
No, you need that. I think I've done startups with 5 people, which I'll never do again. My current business is it's like on paper, it's 2. I would argue there's maybe 4 of us here. The more people, the harder it is to get to decisions, right?
Yes.
But I agree. I think, at least from a partner perspective, everybody has to, at some level, have their lane and be in that, like, do that lane really, 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 really well. So nobody else has to worry about what's happening. I don't want to have to worry about Brooke. You don't have to worry about Ken. You just know we're all rowing the boat in the same
completely
direction. Yeah. and it's hard to find. I think it's hard to find those people
No,
going in.
I do feel like that, Ken once said he considers the founding moment of the company to be the two of us coming together and recognizing that like we're more than the sum of our parts, and that alone is a powerful combination. And I've even had a VC tell me, they're like, I've never seen a founding team that is this sort of balanced. She's like, this is like what you would design if you could like write it down on paper, and you almost never get that.
Yeah, yeah, and it's also a lot of timing. Everybody's in the right place at the right
Of
time.
course, you have to be
So,
willing to do it. Um, 9 times out of 10, someone's not in a position to basically upend their entire life to do a startup. So you kind of have to hope that everybody's on the same page right at the exact same time.
all right. So if anybody goes to the website in infactory.ai, you can join the wait list. So talk to me a little bit about what we're joining the wait list for here a little bit more, and how long do I have to wait?
So good news is that the waitlist is soon to be fully open for our like full beta program within the next week.
And
We
this
are
is we're recording January, the week of January 20th for everybody.
Yes.
Just It'll be
So
a few weeks before anybody hears it.
yes. So you'll by the time this comes out, you will not need to wait on a wait list. The initial beta, what it will be interesting is that it is primarily focused on our developer experience, less so of our sort of business stakeholder experience. So if you are building AI applications and are looking for ways in which you can ensure deterministic outputs, be able to have repeatable queries, be able to create sort of interactions with your AI applications that are, more well suited towards enterprise use cases. This is, our kind of workshop tool, if you will, is the ground floor for that. And that's what we're opening up in the next few weeks.
Now, we're kind of out of time, but I'm going to keep going with you if that's okay. Just a little bit more. Have you thought about, this is the part that always scares me. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
there's pricing. But stuff's expensive the more you use it. Have you thought about sort of what your pricing models are going to be? For people who want to start playing, for me to start playing with it, I have to get some general sense of what this is going to cost.
Totally.
I love flat rate stuff. I like to know what my bill's going to be at the end of the month. But what have you thought about with pricing?
Yeah, I think with pricing, our intent is to start out for the user that you're describing, someone that wants to kind of explore where the value is, and particularly kind of like the individual developer level at a flat rate price. And then what that would mean is we would cap sort of number of queries. We would probably restrict, the full number of sort of sources, ETL kind of coverage that we're going to do with that. And then we're certainly not going to be offering at that sort of flat pricing some of the more enterprise level feature functionality. So, on-premise type deployments and things of that nature. That's, obviously going to require a bit more of a custom kind of pricing model. I am also with you where I prefer things to be predictable. I think developers generally prefer things to be predictable and, being able to budget ahead. And so I always favor more, um, just flat rate by seat or by this number of queries, and this is what you can expect. I will defer to give you a specific number because, given that we're about to launch this into the world, I don't want to say one thing and then it be already obsolete. But given that we are, comparing ourselves to many of the other sort of flat pricing AI tools that are out there, we recognize that I think people have reached kind of a fatigue level right now with the subscriptions, and so we're trying to figure out how do we not have people feel like if they want to use all these different LLM models and they want to use another service on top of that when it's all added together, it's like the way people feel now with streaming where it's like that's now more than a cable package to get all the streaming channels. So we're working through that.
Yeah, just token based pricing is like insanity to me. Insanity to me. Do a couple more questions here. Is there flexibility on what models I can use behind the tooling, or is all that trying to be abstracted away? Like you shouldn't
No,
care what model's being used.
no, so we very much try to take, so, there are models that we're using on our end, but we also take sort of an agnostic view of the model world. And our intent is that whatever model makes the most sense because of your business requirements, we want to make our technology work for you. I think that one of the features that we want to develop as well is potentially some more orchestration where we can at least abstract away the complexity of choosing, does an open source model make more sense here versus, cutting edge OpenAI model, and why would you use one or the other, a smaller model for maybe like on device use cases, all of those things. But at least the initial step here is that, if a customer comes to us and say like, this is the model that I want to work with, our tech will work with that model as needed.
But you're trying to be more than just an API to a model. You're trying to build um, pre workflows, right? That already know how to read an email and do this, or already know how to do that, right? So I don't have to build any of that business logic as much as configure it.
Right. We're trying to abstract away that complexity, recognizing that that's often where, POCs don't really get off the ground because the effort required to understand how to get to a dashboard or how to get to, the report that you're trying to create an artifact around or fill out, some compliance report. All of that is often part of the challenge of getting sort of AI projects off the ground. And, we're trying to support that without you investing a ton of time, fine tuning so that it understands your particular business vocabulary or calculations or things of that nature.
And working with Prediction Guard, says one of my clients, I think one of their biggest selling points has been the security side. Like you don't have to worry about sending that RAG data to the LLM because we're going to guarantee that nobody else sees it, even if Coke and Pepsi are on this platform, right? And sort of that stuff. So can you talk briefly about how you're handling some of that sort of privacy
Yeah.
security?
We are not leveraging data for training whatsoever. So there's no use of any of the customer data that we're working on to go back into a large language model or even our own technology, right? I think for us, it's better to think about it as like we kind of need to rent the data to query over it, but we don't ingest the data. It doesn't now live, somewhere in our system. We try to limit sort of that movement, if you will. And it's, again, also where we can support things like on-prem deployment and all of that if those safeguards and measures need to be in place. But we're very much not focused on training. We're also, a big thing for us is we don't scrape. So, we're not trying to go out on the open web and crawl for data to, just create sort of a bigger and bigger data set for what we're doing. We're kind of the small model view of the world.
I think that's the hardest thing to prove to someone, that I've just sent you this document and you've had it in a very transient state and you don't have it anymore. It's just such a hard thing you have to sell that, and it's such a hard thing to prove.
Well, yeah, because you're selling a negative. It's like it's like you're proving something that didn't happen. You're like, I didn't steal your data, so
Yeah, I know it's hard, but and I'm not even sure how Prediction Guard is necessarily selling that just yet, other than we're saying that we don't do it, right?
Right,
But
right.
but I know the architecture. I know we don't do it. There's no part of the architecture that will allow it. But I could show you an architecture diagram all day. It doesn't mean I didn't add another server
Right.
behind the scenes.
It's where the human element matters, right? It's some of it is what principles of trust do you seem to bring to like your business dealings? Do those translate then into your tech?
All right, we are completely way out of overtime for I really appreciate you spending so much time. The story is fascinating. I love how you got from kind of going to uni and not knowing what you wanted to do, and kind of working your way up now as a entrepreneur in an AI tech startup with all that experience you bring. That's awesome.
Thank you. It's been fun to go back down memory lane a little bit. I did not expect to go back to high school, so that was a fun little journey. And loved covering a lot of topics with you. So thank you.
My daughter number three, I feel I'm gonna have her listen to this show when it's out. She went to university for education. She thought she was going to be in the classroom. Decided her last year she didn't want to be in the classroom, but finished the education degree outside the classroom, and then started working for a company that owned restaurants, like Italian restaurant, like a chain. And she's kind of grown there now as somebody who manages and opens up stores. And she's starting to get burned out on retail. And I was already telling her, I think you should go get your MBA. I think there's other things that you can do. And I want her to hear your story because I think your path is something similar that she could even sort of think about at least, right? And also let her know that you're not locked into this because this is what you've been doing for the last 2 years.
No,
right?
not at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's far more career opportunities that people don't even recognize for their skill set. It's kind of what I was saying about my son, where I'm like, I can't even imagine the kind of work he'll do in the future. Many of the things that I do now didn't exist when I was in college. So, yeah, things are always changing.
Yeah, but I would love for number 3 to sort of take a similar journey. I know she could. I just don't think she knows it's available. That's why I love these podcasts and these shows, because I think it could open up to people that you can do that too. Like that is an option.
Yeah. Yeah. A path that you might not have thought about before.
Yeah. Or even that it was, wait, I could get out of this industry now, even though I've been in it for so long. Of course you can. There's people that would love your skill set, even though it's not restaurant based anymore, even though it's not based on that anymore. We're out of time. Brooke, if anybody wanted to reach out to you, we'll put it in the show notes. We'll get it in there. But what's the best way for somebody to reach out if they had a question?
If there's a question, I would do press@infactory.ai. And that kind of is our catch-all for, all things external. So that would be the email address to use.
No, that's fair. That's fair. All right. Thank you again for hanging out with me so long and telling your story. I really appreciate it.
Much appreciated. Fun time all around. And enjoy, I guess, the rest of the week.
Yeah. All right. This is the On Labs podcast signing off with Brooke Hartley Moy and Bill Kennedy. And we hope to see everybody again real soon.